it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.
Hey, welcome to the Really Charlie Podcast. I'm Charlie Perry. I'm glad to be on this show today. Got a great guest coming on. It's going to be Christian Bradley West, the Country Clairvoyant. Man, I can never pronounce that. But he's going to be coming on shortly. I can't wait to hear him. This dude is a funny man. Definitely doing his thing here on Facebook, Instagram. He's doing great things, and I just can't wait to have him on the show. But there's a lot of new guests coming on, meeting a lot of people through this podcast, and so stay tuned. Some great people are going to be featured. A lot of authors, producers, publishers, got a lot of things coming up, and I can't wait, and this is everything that I expected this podcast to be, and then some, because I'm meeting so many folks that I would have never ever met if I didn't have this podcast. So it's doing a lot of good things for me, and hopefully you, as you are watching the podcast on a weekly basis, and it's definitely good stuff I'm trying to bring to you, and so it's just wait for our guest to get on here. Funny dude. You could find him on Instagram, a lot of social media. He has his own podcast. Bring up a screen here, and I can't wait. And I was given his name by another guest, Kim Conray, and so I reached out to him, and we connected, and decided we would do a podcast today. What's up, Michael? How you doing, man? Nice to hear from you. My friend Michael. We had I came across this new app called Swells, SWELLS, and it's a great app, man. It's definitely a good app. You should try it out on your phones. Check it out. Different interactions. You can have conversations with people about almost anything, if you're a musician, you're an artist, with me, it's poetry, and you can just go interact with people all over the world, and it's pretty nice. My man, Ron Henderson, what's up, bro? How's that foot coming along, man? Hopefully you're all is well, definitely want to get you back on this podcast real soon, both you and Michael. But the craziest thing is that time goes by so quick. I'm booking people left and right, and I'm filling in the dates, and it's like, all right, 1 month's filled, the other month's filled. It's getting to the point where I'm gonna have to go back to doing a podcast on multiple days throughout the week. As you know, I do have the radio station to go to on Tuesday, WMB1 Radio, and myself and Russell Ramus. So I think I'm going to have to add another day during the week, only because, hey, if y'all want to come on the podcast, I'm going to make sure I find the time to put you on it. It's all good for me, all good for you. So this guest, Christian is he does all kinds of things, memes. He's he's very funny. He should actually be on TV and not on social media. Dude is hilarious, and I like to see him doing a little bit more. And he's very, very successful. So I just like to, he's definitely funny dude, man. So the he's got a website. I'm gonna put it up on the bottom line here, and the I keep in contact with him through Instagram. In fact, I hear him right now coming in the studio. So without further ado, let's put our guest on the air. All right.
Hey, Charlie.
Richard, what's up, man?
Hey, sorry that took a minute.
It's all right. Yeah. You're a host of your own podcast. You know how it goes, sometimes.
Yeah, it happens.
Sometimes chicken, sometimes feathers,
Yeah. Oh, this is true.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm so happy to have you on here.
I'm glad to be here.
Everything that Kim had said about you was I found out to be true. Funny guy. You're definitely involved in your craft. Doing different things. Got a lot of followers on Instagram, and I caught a podcast you were on. What was it? Let me try to. Spiritual Spiral, I believe.
Yeah.
Are those two still? They still doing their podcast?
Yes, I saw on Instagram actually today. I guess they posted a new episode. It was in their stories. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have some pretty interesting stuff on there. So
I'm definitely gonna reach out to them. I think that could be a future guest on the podcast. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, they'll be receptive. Yeah.
All right. So I was reading some of your titles here. It says author, podcaster, word wizard, internal alchemist, and astro hole.
Oh yeah. Where'd you find that? Where did I write that? I forgot. Is it on Instagram?
Instagram. So are you an expensive hole?
Yes, my rates have increased over time.
Well, if you're traveling the whole, the gas prices are definitely raised up, make you bring your prices up, man.
Yeah, luckily I'm not, so that's a good thing. So yeah.
So, it's pretty hot in this this upstairs of my home. So occasionally I'm gonna do this, wipe my brow.
That's okay. I saw a really funny I don't know if it's a tweet, something and somebody put on their stories yesterday, which is that I'm not going to say it's hot or anything, but I did see two hobbits just chuck a ring into my backyard. And that just had me in stitches because I really do love the Lord of the Rings. And so it just tickled me that, they were like, basically, the backyard had turned into Mordor, and it kind of feels that way.
Yeah,
so
definitely. It does.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, you got, from what I'm reading, 20 years experience, and I think where did you come up with the name, the Country Clairvoyant? Clairvoyant. I'll get it together.
No, that's okay. I haven't been able to pronounce words in the last few days either, and I'm a writer. So I think. I don't. It's one of those inspired things that just comes to you. I think, I've always kept journals. I really started writing, long answer, but about 2012, maybe 2011, I started my first novel. So it took me a while to learn to use my words, and I realized consciously I had to consciously use my sense of humor. I had a sense of humor, but it wasn't always available. I felt like because some drama happened in life, right? And I would be taken out by it and get sucked into the story of the drama. And then somewhere along the way, I was like, God, I got to stop that. I want to just, can I laugh at this? I was like, life is pretty absurd half the time. And so I'm like, can I just look at the absurdity of it? So I got the idea. I guess it was maybe summer of 2017. And then at the end of the year, I just felt really compelled to do it. So I was like, the voice in my head, that's what I call it. Yeah, whatever. We all have the voice in our head, right? But I have a very clear one that I feel like comes from inspiration instead of the fear and all the other ones. And so I was like, okay, I feel really inspired to start making funny spiritual memes and really allow my sense of humor to come out. And yeah, so that's how that came to be. It was really kind of a gimmick in a way, just an excuse to have fun. But it's taken off, and it continues to take off. It's getting now people's attention. I've got a publisher that reached out, and I had some, casting directors from some reality TV shows reach out.
Nice,
so it's kind of turning into its own creature, which is what everything creative does, right? So
Yes.
So there it is. Yeah.
Yes. I'm very impressed. I'm glad that I had Kim on here, because if I didn't have Kim on this podcast, I wouldn't have you on the podcast. As much as I'm on Instagram and social media,
yeah,
I would have missed you.
It's hard. And I think Instagram's, it has suppressed me. I've noticed over the years, because I think I'm a little edgy. So I'm anywhere from PG-13 to NC-17. I feel like so.
Yeah.
Occasionally PG, but I don't know. My post today was G. It was pretty G today, but I do span the range. And Kim is great. Kim has been such a good friend. I met her in the writers group, which was a lifesaver for me. I mean, I had been writing in a vacuum, and then I think it was maybe 2015. I actually went to an event, a book event at Mercer University, because a friend of mine, a dear friend, had graduated from there.
Okay.
And they mentioned this writers group, and I was like, oh, okay, I probably should check that out. And sure enough, and of course Kim was there, and of course you had George on too, her husband, and it was great. Of course they met in the writers group, so we had a pretty good collection. Sadly, I'm no longer in Atlanta, so I had to, I haven't been able to go, unfortunately, which I miss it. I'm in Virginia, and I looked for a writers group here, and I haven't been able to find anything. So I don't think anything's going to compare to having George and Kim in my life, though. So they're pretty outstanding humans, and I'm blessed.
They sure are.
Them. Yeah.
I was very fortunate to have both of them on the podcast, and because of both of them, I have branched out and I have some other guests coming on. So and then that's great, because it's not in my local area, the New England area. It's broadening. It's going more down south. Even though I have family and friends all over the country.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that my audience is getting bigger through my guest. And but I just I had fun scrolling through your Instagram and trying to get as much as I can, bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And this clairvoyant, give me an understanding of it.
So, I feel like it's so tricky. I feel like I'm a snake oil salesman saying I'm psychic, or I feel like, because I've always had these. So I tell you, these three things have been running together for me my whole life, which is science, spirituality, and art. Those three things kind of encapsulate my interests, and they always have. My degrees in exercise science, and and I always did art. So I'm in museums and galleries and things like that. And so, I managed to make that happen, and I ended up falling into doing design work. textile design work. And then, but the really the common thread through all of it has been the spirituality, if we want to call it that. I don't know if there's a separation between, as I would say, the sacred and the profane, or the spirituality and our physical beings, but at this point in my practice, but I feel like that I've always had this really strong intuition about things. And my mom said I always did. So I just decided to follow that thread, and then something happened around the time I really started writing, and I ended up losing my job there too. I don't know, something just like this cap popped off, right, of me, and I just could meet people and know things about them. Which at first was a little creepy. And then, I'm a, for lack of a better term, I'm a medium, I suppose, too, is a way to put it. So ghosts came through. I started dating, sadly now my ex-partner, and his mother had just died. And I'm pretty sure she brought us together, because she ended up showing up in my living room one night and told me all these things. And then very early on, he said to me, "How do you know this stuff?" And I was like, well, I kind of can do this thing where dead people show up and then they talk to me. And, and so she feels like she has some unresolved business. So, she knocked on my door. She didn't knock on my door, though, because she wasn't that type of person. She was a hot mess, and she just showed up and was like, "I need to talk to my son." We need to have a conversation. And, and it scared him, though. And it did me in the beginning too, because he was like everyone. He was brought up in the South and, indoctrinated to those things are of the devil. But it's kind of hard to say you're of the devil when those things are happening, and they're also helping people. So, my intuition, I guess, initially I honed through my art and my creativity, because I would just, again, which is what we touched on in the beginning, I'll just feel inspired to do something.
Yeah.
And so I kind of follow it. Like I get a little thread, and then I just kind of, I just follow it and see, where is this going to take me? And that's what happens with, the whole clairvoyant thing and the psychic thing, or the knowing things that you just don't know. Where is it coming from? And I liken it to plugging into some universal backup drive, right? I'm just plugging into something, and if it's individual, it's like I'm plugging into their backup drive, and all this information is there, and all I'm doing is just getting the information, and hopefully science will figure this out at some point, and figure out what we're doing and how we're doing it. I know there's been some research on people who have meditated and things going on in their brain, and even some, quote unquote energy healers. So, and the brain is doing some really wild stuff, with these people. So, I'm curious to see what the future holds with all of that, because it is something. And I always say I'm my biggest skeptic, but I go, how do I know this stuff? How do I know the things I know? And I don't. My favorite story is I had a client, and I was talking to her, and I just kept hearing Sugarland, which is a band I was connected to because Jennifer Nettles, the lead singer, would sing at Pride in Atlanta every year. So I would see her there. And then I actually got to see the first 3 Sugarland concerts in Atlanta that they ever did before they ever signed a record label. And so I just kept, so I had a connection to them. And so I kept hearing that word in my head. So finally I said to my client, I said, okay, we have to talk about the band Sugarland. Do you know the country band Sugarland? And she goes, she was kind of blown away. She was like, that's wild. And I said, why? She said, my ex played in the band.
Wow.
And so it's one of my favorite stories, that I remember, because it came through so I love when it comes through crystal clear. When I get a name, something happens, because I don't always get specificity or that specific. Sometimes I'll just get a feeling about something and go, okay, let's follow this rabbit, and see where it takes us. So, I'm in awe when I have these conversations, or I hear other stories, even stories from my clients of things that have happened with them. And so it inspires the awe, and I love it. And I love that I was so inspired to create the account and have connected with so many amazing humans through it. It's been pretty fantastic. So yeah, so it's just, I define the clairvoyance, just this knowing. I hear things too. I sometimes smell things. One time I was on the phone with a client, I started smelling smoke, and she said, I just lit incense.
Yep.
And or sage or something, and I laughed. She's like, okay. So I got, the clair, so there's clairaudience, clairsentience, all the different clairs. I think there's 5 of them. I always forget. But clairvoyant sounded better. Country clairvoyant sounded better than clairaudient,
Yeah.
So it had more of a, a ring to it.
I love it.
So
I love it. How does it do you incorporate it with your writing, your book? In fact, how many books do you have?
So I've written one book
Okay.
that's completed. Pretty much. I'm kind of, I tinker on it. It's a tinkerer now. It's kind of like that car in the shop that that classic car that you just keep going back to and like doing little things on.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like become that for me now. And so I tinker with it. So I was tinkering with it, but it's been finished for a while. Had a couple close calls with some publishers years back, but then just kind of sat on it, and it's just, it's probably sometimes days I'm like, God, this is the love of my life. This book is the love of my life. So it's really something that comes from the heart for me. But I got the inspiration to do that years ago in November of 2000. What year was it? 2011. And so I went home and I started it. After being inspired to do that, driving between 2 carpet mills actually one day. And I saw a dog on the side of the road, and I was like, oh, post-apocalyptic dog. And then it just kind of a cybernetic dog. And so I was like, oh, a book about cybernetic dogs that have to, so it's kind of like Homeward Bound meets the Terminator.
Wow.
It's a little bit like it. So that's that book. And then that's again, that's pretty much done. And then the other book that came, so then I had asked previous to that if there was some project, something that I could work on that could get me out of corporate America, things that I could create that might help with, create residual income and things like that. And I got 3 book ideas. And the second was a spirituality book. The working title was You Are Here on Purpose. And then the third, and the third book was a memoir, which I knew I wasn't ready to write. So that year in 2012, my job laid me off. So I went and I just started writing, and just kind of, I had and ate into my retirement and had some help and things. And so what I ended up doing was writing a whole journal that was basically the second book. And have kept notes over the years with that. And then recently a publisher reached out and asked if I had a book idea. And I was like, yeah, this is the one. So, and I started the memoir too, somewhere in that time period. I think around 2019, I went to a friend's house in North Georgia and was living there for a while. And something said to start that. So I don't know, I had to get something out of me. So I only got, a quarter of the way done with that before I picked up the other projects. But so I feel like I have overall these 3 primary stories. The science fiction is 3 books. So, so in total I have, 5, maybe 5 books in me total. So we'll see. I keep getting inspired to do things. I have some short stories I'm working on and things like that. So, I'm like any artist or creative human. It's sometimes harder. You might struggle with, I don't know. It's harder to produce. You don't have the bandwidth to produce all the things that kind of funnel through you. So you got to pick and choose. So I've stuck with these 3 projects creatively because they came through very strongly. And then along the way, you have a few other things that come along, like the Instagram account and, and other things. So yeah, it's so that's what I'm working on right now. So hopefully in the next year or 2, we'll have a published book in hand, finally.
I'll be ready.
Yeah.
I'll put it right near Kim's book. Well, when hers comes up, I believe in September.
Yeah.
And then I bought all of George's books. And I'm reading one of them. And so you're next in line, whenever that happens.
Excellent. Yay. Good.
Yeah. I love writing. I'm just mainly doing poetry. I did a couple of children's stories. Just based on my neighborhood growing up. And so I want to continue to get better, and I think one of the things I'm going to do is go to the Atlanta Writers Club conference, and
Yeah,
I'd like to do that. So if it's not this year, I'm getting some feedback. I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
you're fun.
Keep hearing an echoing or something. All right. Might be from the YouTube channel. The so I basically I want to get better. I have so many stories going on in this head, but I don't have the time, Well,
Yeah.
I say that, but I if I do it first thing in the morning, I'm good.
Yeah.
But if my day starts, I'm not going to be able to write anything.
No, I understand. I'm pretty fresh in the morning myself. And so I try and wake up, and actually I just started drinking coffee again after not drinking coffee for probably over 20 years. But my body was kind of like, hey, let's reset this and let's get this in us. So I'm trying, my intention is to wake up earlier, because I'm reading all this research about waking up earlier and going to bed earlier and having the light, and I can't ignore it. I can't cherry pick. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is saying it's healthy. So you probably, because I've been a night owl for most of my life. I love the night. That's when I'll work. But I'm finding, like you, really fresh first thing in the morning is really good. But, I would say this creatively, I don't feel like I really found my voice, or my voice really had to be uncovered. I don't know if I found it. I think it was always there. I just had to uncover it, and it's taken me, I feel like, a decade to really, know how I want to communicate. It took that long to really hone my skill. And I feel like now it's flying out of me. When I sit down, I can kind of like hit a button. The book that the acquisitions editor for the publisher is interested in now, it's taken me a few or a couple iterations to figure out how to make this work, because and he said, when we submitted the first outline, he said, well, usually people submit things that they think I want, and I haven't made it clear to him yet, like that's not what I did, right? Like, I submitted something I thought that I wanted, and then I had to revisit it and go, wait a second, this spirituality book, for lack of a better term, is probably a little more autobiographical than I thought. So I had to really tell my philosophy through the lens of how I've lived it and how I came to it. And so uncovering that, if we want to say it that way, and not being brave enough to be intimate, right? And allowing my story to come out about how I arrived to this, and arrived to my conclusions through my observations, is something that is the way the book wanted to be told. And I thought I was going to write like your standard spirituality book about my philosophies connected to what, other philosophies. And, and I was like, that's just not working. And so I love that, this editor found me and has really invited me to ask some questions about, and this is what people do in our life. This is what a writers group did. This is what's really great about having humans in our life, is to go, because sometimes you're so close to it, right? Like you just can't see it. So that's why we get in these writers groups, or we have artist critiques, or we ask our friends' perspective, or even people come to me. I think that's why most people come to me as clients, not just because of my intuition, but because they need a different perspective. And they choose someone intuitive, right? Who's completely not attached to the outcome, to hopefully give them a very honest perspective, which is what I try and do. So I had to practice that with myself. So I told the editor on the second go round of the outline and stuff, is give me a couple more weeks. And at the first week, I really had to sit on it. And the second week, I had to sit on it mostly, and just allow it to unfold within me. And I'm really messy with my creative process. I don't sit down to the computer and just write. I can't do that. I have to start in my journal, and I take notes, and I just scribble thoughts, and I just I give myself the freedom to be just super duper messy. And I think, in art too, I start off with all my tools, right? I surround myself
Yep.
with the books I like, or the paints I want, or whatever. I get the blank canvas. I get everything together, but then it gets messy really fast. And I think that's something that I've found in my clients and in people in general, regardless of what they're creating in life. They don't allow the mess part. They're afraid to go into the mess, and they're afraid to just allow, you know, to pull out the weeds, to look at the flowers, to just go through the whole process of figuring out how you know, they want to design, in that case, their garden, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But you get dirt all over you, and you let it happen, and you get muddy, and you really, that's I think at this point probably one of my more favorite parts of the process, when I've learned to love the structuring. I've learned to love that. I think, you know, I was really happy, speaking of honing your voice and your skills, if anyone's struggling out there with a creative venture, know this. My editor that I worked with for my science fiction for a while had pointed out that I struggled with structure and pacing, and I agreed with her. I knew that I struggled with that. Well, this now editor said, you don't have a problem with structure. I can tell. He said, this is normally, that's what I really struggle with people, but you structured this really well. And it was a
Nice.
testament. Well, yeah. And it was one of those little moments I wanted to celebrate, because I was like, oh, I've come far. I've come much further, you know, and that was like 5 years ago with the other editors. So in 5 years, I've really matured and really understand structure in a way. But I'll say this, I understand intuitively. So my structure is not always obvious, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't base or compare the way I want to structure something with the way other people structure it. But really, the science fiction book taught me structure, because it has flashbacks, and it's structured weird, and, you know, so it's not linear. And I've had to, in all of my life, to learn to not be linear. And this is where the mess comes in, you know.
I totally understand it. I really do. It's I gotta learn to take some more criticism when it comes to my poetry. I don't want to change it. You know, I like it the way it came out, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I have the name A Poetic Pouch, and I just let it flow just the way it came out. And it backfired me a couple of times, because the way I wrote something, the group that I was in, they said, oh, it's okay. And a couple of friends started critiquing it. The very next week, I bring it back again, the way they critiqued it. And the whole group said, I like this. I like how you changed things. You learned something. And guess what? All I did is take what they told me to write, and I wrote it in my poem. And I have to accept that. I have to learn to take what people give me. And that's what actually kept me from going to the university, because I didn't want to go in front of a professor and have him critique me. And it just was something that I was afraid of, actually, you know. It was, and but now that I seen firsthand how some of the university and colleges conduct some of their writing classes, courses, I could have done it. I could have flourished pretty well in there. And but I have my own path, just like you have your own path, right?
Well, the good news is life is full of infinite second chances, as I like to say. So if we didn't do something in the past and we want to do it now, there's always an opportunity to do it. And so, you know, and to your point, you know, I've struggled with it too. You know, in the group, you know, people would point out words that they said, this word sounds out of place, or this sentence, or this structure of this sentence, or something like that. And it was probably a word I really loved, especially because I've really become very articulate. So, you know, I was like, oh, I really like that. I really like that. Yeah. Like, how could you not understand what I'm trying to say here? Things like that. And then, you know, and I'll preface this before I finish saying poetry's hard. I mean, I've learned to write through poetry. I mean, it was my favorite medium as a kid. And so, because it was short, concise, and you can say something very big, you can contain a star, so to speak, in your hands with poetry.
Yes.
And so to be poetic about it. And so, you can have that. So what I love about it, that's what I love about it. But, it was funny. There's a phrase that you might have heard called "kill your darlings,"
Yes.
and so that's really, for those that don't know who are listening, "kill your darlings" in the writing world is if you think something is important or you think you need it for your book, and somebody says no, then and it's really too precious to you, then you're gonna have to kill it. And so, or let go of it in the editing process. And I had a friend very early on who was a writer as well. And when I decided to do this in 2011, in 2012, he said it to me. He said, the best writing happens in the editing. And I found this to be true. There are certain things that will fly out of me, right? And there are very, very few sentences or paragraphs in the book that in my first book that I did not tweak over and over again. And, and this I would say if there's any at this point, maybe a sentence here and there, that can't just flew out of me. But again, I write in my journal, I read it the first time, I was like, I did it even last week. I was like, this is beautiful. I love this. I even read it to a couple of friends and they were like, it's beautiful. Well, when I sat down to write it, it was just like a page and a half. When I sat down to write it, that introduction that I did has turned into 3 pages and turned into the beginning of the book in a way that I was like, oh, I gotta add this and I gotta add that. I gotta expand on this. So, the editing oftentimes is the expansion. It's where we get the opportunity to expand, while also, interestingly enough, working within the dichotomy of it, working within the confines of the structure, that we place for ourselves. And so I think killing our darlings has been probably the hardest part. And it comes through the critique, right? It comes through
I agree.
It comes through that outside source going, I don't know. So, I've had to myself, that's why it took so much time to not write, to not try and force anything with this book, to go, okay, these were my questions. Because again, I work intuitively. And I think anyone can use this tool if they're listening and say, how does this book want to be written? What is my voice in this book? How does it want to come into the world? And I really had to pause for a moment and go, okay, it came to me inspired. And I say, I don't know if anyone's read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, but it's like this thing. She talks about the creative process in that book. It's a really lovely book, but I related to a lot of it because I've experienced all of it actually. And so if something comes and lays down at your feet, I don't think she says it exactly like this, but if a creative project, something comes and lays at your feet, then it wants your attention, but it's also not yours.
I agree.
And I love it. So we've got Michael. He said, all of what is said regarding writing and editing, I'm living every day. Living within the structures required taste that does have a layer of forgiveness. I love that, a layer of forgiveness, Michael. That's really lovely, because I define forgiveness really as the dropping of judgment. And so we can't judge it. We can't go, oh, this is precious and this is good and I need to keep it, or this is bad and I need to discard it. It just goes, what's good for what's the nutrition, so to speak, like what's the vital aspect of this that I need to keep here, and let the other things fall away, and let the story reveal itself to you, let the writing reveal itself to you. And I think that's a really hard place to be.
It sure is. I did a book about a local boxer, and he died with the U.S. national boxing team. They crash landed in Poland, and the whole team was lost. That book, I kind of I kept chopping it up, and as I chopped it up, and I spoke to more and more people, I found out that I have another story that I need to write. And it was a lot of backstories of each of the guests that I did interview or found some information on.
Yeah.
And 1 second. So I need to follow the editor's recommendation because I always want to look for another story.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing something.
So I'm not hearing it on my side, if that makes you
No,
feel better.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
you're
does.
yeah.
It
No, I'm
does.
not hearing it at all. But yeah, I think certain this is part of the messiness of it. Certain things that we think we are going to do, like I said before, I thought I was going to write a book that I thought I was writing the book I wanted to write. When I realized that's not the book that wanted to come through me, and ultimately not the book I want to write. You
Mhm.
know, I was like, and I get it. This editor found me through my Instagram, so he wanted the humor, he wanted it, and I giggle because he says I want it dripping with Christian, which will probably become a funny story down the road. But I was like, okay, what is that? What is that? And again, it wanted to come through me as my story, not just how I came to be to experience life and understand things, which of course Elizabeth Gilbert does, and Lamont does, Anna Quinlan, a lot of other really great writers who are very observational about their world and then share those observations. And I was like, why can't I be that writer? Why? Well, I'm not going
Mhm.
to be Eckhart Tolle or Don Miguel Ruiz or these other spiritual writers that I had that had helped me and that I enjoyed. I was like, that's just not how I operate. And it's true. All my friends say every story has to be yours. I
Mhm.
can't objectify it. And that's what I learned in this process. And again, I think for those writers out there listening, we are in all of our work. I think there might be writers that disagree and say, no, I'm not in this, because there are writers that write for money and just do things because of it. But we got to write what we're interested in, at least, or
Yeah.
something that sparks our interest. And they say, write what you know. But I like to say, and if you don't know it, then get to know it,
Yes. Yes. I agree.
because I had to learn about artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and really dive into that for the science fiction. And it wasn't far off from what I like, because I love brain science. I'd already been reading books about, and been keeping up with brain research and things like that. So the technology is kind of similar. AI is, these artificial neural networks and things like that. So I had to learn, get to know what I didn't know, but I was interested in it. It's something that inspired me. So
Right.
yeah.
Um, you seem like you're the go-to person amongst family and friends. Um, and when people go into you, uh, and it's more like it's part of your profession. It's part of what makes you money.
Yeah.
How do you separate that? How do you
Oh,
will you have a friendly conversation, or do you have a therapy session, or how do you separate that when it comes to good friends and family?
I don't.
All right.
I really don't compartmentalize.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I do have to do is I have to stop being the fixer,
Mm-hmm.
especially with friends and family. So if someone comes to me and they're paying me for a service, then they're paying me for something. They're paying me for the information. They're paying me for the hour to brainstorm, to go through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're coming to me very willing, asking the questions that want to be asked. Okay. Family and friends aren't always that way.
Yeah.
And I learned this. That's why I said, okay, I've learned this even with clients. If they don't pay me, this is why I don't advertise. I don't, Instagram is my advertising. I let things fall where they may, because what I found is that if I seek it out, then I'm going to make a mistake. I'm not looking to, I want people to recognize me and go,
Mm-hmm.
there's something about this human that I want to touch base with. So when it comes to that, I allow them to find me. I also allow them to find me with family and friends, but But the difference is that it's more intimate. So in the past, I would go, I have to fix this. And sometimes I do have to fix it. Right now, I'm taking care of my grandmother. I found out, there's something up with one of her medications. So I had to talk to the doctor and so sometimes I got to fix it. But that's a very mechanical thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a very physical thing that can be fixed. But as far as like an emotional, mental kind of experience, or internal thing that maybe someone's struggling with, I can't become the fixer. Sometimes all I can do is be the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's enough. So and with clients, I'm the listener too. Oftentimes, if someone works with me more often, many times it will turn into therapy. They will need to talk about things, and then I'll listen, and then I'll intuit, and I'll say, okay, let's go down this path. Let's ask this question. Let's look at this. But they're coming to me for me to ask them those questions and to get the information. Whereas family and friends aren't all the time. Family and friends just want a safe place to land,
I agree.
And so I allow that. So it's not so much I compartmentalize as much as I recognize my role in any given moment. And of course, the family and friends, I say, well, do you want my advice? And if you want my advice, I'll give you my advice. I still might volunteer it because I can't help myself, especially if I feel something coming through and I was like, okay, can we address this? Can we ask this question? So sometimes that'll happen, but not always. So
nice.
Yeah,
it's good. I was saying before you came on the podcast, I was saying that you belong on TV.
Oh,
and
I've heard that a lot.
And you do. You truly do. And I don't know what sitcom I would put you on, but it's probably a dime a dozen that I could put you in. And I really I think that you have that in you. And
I think it's coming. I have a show I've been working on. I have actually an actress friend of mine. We were going to work on a show together. It hasn't happened yet, but I was thinking, but I have a show that I want to pitch to HBO, and I have I thought if my story ever got turned into a show or movie, my science fiction, I'd want to play the voice of one of the dogs. I would definitely say. I would definitely say I'm gonna be this dog. So yeah, I think it's coming. It's weird. I'm kind of I feel like a late bloomer. Actually, one of the it's funny you say that because one of the casting directors said, why aren't you famous yet? And my response was trauma. I've had some PTSD, literally, and some OCD, which is something Kim and I have talked about, because she wrote the book on it.
Yes.
So again, I had to, and it was interesting. It wasn't until I started writing that really the healing started to, I think, finish itself, because learning to use my voice wanted out of me. My voice wanted out. It just wanted to, and so really I had to learn how to use my voice before I could show up in this capacity.
Wow. So you stored a lot of energy, good, bad, and ugly for a very, very long time, because what you say, 2012, you started writing, right? So
So I was 33.
Yeah.
I was 33 at the time. Yeah.
That's and I like one on your podcast, you had mentioned something about controlling the energies that you that come to you, where you can just kind of move away from it. Some humans like you can't do that. They can't control it, and it kind of stresses them out. And where you can really see it in them, where they're just going through so many emotions based on what they're seeing and what's coming to them, the energies. So I'm glad that you can move away from that, and
filters.
We
have to learn our filters and how to filter things out. I think that's the challenge. It's definitely it's a thing. So.
Well, I definitely want to have a session with you. I'm gonna follow the script on your webpage, and I'm definitely gonna get in contact with you and go through that experience with you.
Awesome. That'll be fun.
For one, I do trust you, so that's why I'm going. And
thank you.
I really I really want to do that. It's especially today. I really started feeling it. I said, man, that would have been great if I just had a session before we came on the podcast, you know?
Yeah, but that's okay because we can have another podcast, you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
You can tell me how you felt about it. We can walk through it,
Hmm.
whatever. So yeah, that's good stuff.
Speaking of podcasts, is yours, you still actively doing your podcast?
So I'm not at the moment. So, I started last year and then, life just kept taking over.
Hmm.
I moved. I was actually sick for a minute. Nothing serious, thankfully. They found that everything was fine.
Good, good.
But for about 8 months, I was struggling with something. And then they didn't know what it was. And so that kind of took over. I became my grandmother's caretaker.
Hmm.
Um, Thankfully, she doesn't need that much of it, but she can still do a lot of things on her own. But I still am present for that, So it's been there's been a lot of chaos, and
Hmm.
I've had to like every time in life reprioritize. So the podcast I feel like is kind of like the memoir where I started writing it, I got a chunk of things done, and then I said, okay, I have to hit pause on this
Yes.
because this other project came in, and for some reason, and this is really how I've always worked. Speaking of poetry, there's been lots of times in my life where I was writing something and I would take these little pauses and poetry would show up,
Hmm.
and I love it. Poetry to me shows up like, like this old friend who, is homeless,
Hmm. Yeah.
who comes to you and says, can I have a home for the night? And you're like,
Hmm.
sure, for an hour. Can I rest here? And so it's like, oh, and here's a gift, and then it's gone again. I love Alice Walker. I love when she said, I never think I'm gonna write another poem.
Hmm.
And I remember reading that in one of her books, and it thrilled me because I thought to myself, oh, Alice, I feel the same way. You never
Um,
think you're going to be inspired again or something's going to
hmm.
present, and then it just arrives. So I've always done some jumping around. I've learned though to maintain my focus and use those moments of distraction, so to speak, consciously. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm just going to take a breath, right? And it becomes something that nourishes something else. Even for this book, the spirituality book, I went to poetry. I said, how do I write this? And I know it might not make sense to other people because I wanted to write something that was very plain spoken,
Yes.
and funny, but also with turns of phrase. And you can't turn a phrase if you don't know how to be poetic. You can't.
So true.
Poetry teaches us how to turn the phrase, how to turn a word upside down and use it in a way that people would have never thought to use it before.
I agree.
And I love that. So I turned to poetry recently and said, I'm just gonna kind of like tap into that vibe and use that. And I do. I love lyricism. It's one of my most favorite ways to write. But it takes practice. And
Yeah, it does.
so, I feel like with the podcast, I'll go back to it eventually. A couple of friends said it doesn't feel like it's enough you in it. And I think it made sense. I thought I was being a little too serious.
Hmm.
So I'm like, again, how can I make this funny? So I think I'm going to go back and record the first 5 episodes I did and then do a few more. But I don't know, because right now I've got a book to write that a publisher actually wants,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then another book that I want to start submitting again, to publishers, because it's feeling complete. So my deadline for this book is for the next draft of the proposal, and the outline is Monday. So
Wow.
I'm working to get that done. And then next week I'll shift gears and go back to what I call the dog book,
Hmm.
and I'll work on that I'll try and get that knocked out next week and then see what the publisher has to say. And then hopefully there's a book deal and I'll be writing, getting that book done. But my plan was to write that book this summer anyway. So
Yes.
I was really delighted. I said, I told my editor, I said, you have really good timing.
Hmm.
This is really good timing. Again, maybe it was intuition. I don't know, but something aligned for that. So I'll return back to the podcast. I
Good.
like, and the book won't be called You Are Here on Purpose, but that's good because then the podcast can be.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and have and kind of become its own thing, you know. So, and I'm okay with that, you know, maybe even something that's related to the book, but separate from it. Because
Got it.
really, I was doing it as proof of concept for the book, but my Instagram seemed to turn into proof of concept.
Yeah.
So,
It's, and that's like reading a book. I mean, I'm going post by post by post, and I'm
thank
like,
you,
I just, so you definitely have a follower, as I've been, and
thank you,
I'm going to continue to do and support what I can when
thank
it
you.
comes to, would you say, what was the porn name? Christian Bradley West, or was it Brad West? What was it?
Oh, Christian Bradley West.
All right. So in that podcast, you had mentioned someone had said that it sounded like a porn name.
Oh, Brad West. Yeah. So my
Brad
name,
West.
my family calls me Brad West. That's right.
Yeah.
And so they call me Brad. They
Mm-hmm.
picked Brad, who's my middle name. But I had a friend who was, yeah, I did. I had a friend early on who helped me with design my first website. And he said Brad West he said sounds like a porn name, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, his name was Rod Stafford, by the way. And
Yep.
so I was like, it was a dear friend at the time, and just a lovely human. And so I giggled and I said, okay, well, what did you do? He said, well, I used your whole name. And he said, it has a ring to it.
Yeah, it does.
And so I said, so my mom did really well there. And so I said, okay, let's do it. And so that's what I picked up from that moment. He was again an outside force, somebody who came in and helped me recognize that I had something of value. And yeah, I mean, Brad West sounds great. It sounds like an 80s,
Yeah.
character.
Like
And sure
like
enough, I was born
like
at the
Adam West's
time.
brother.
Yeah, exactly. So I was, yeah, people always say like Adam West, or my students when I taught, would call me Mr. Wild Wild West. That was one of
Uh-huh.
their favorite things to do. So that tickled me. I was okay with that. But yeah, so so the name thing was also another iteration. I've been through a lot of different iterations in life. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna embrace this kind of the totality of me. So, and Christian West is a little flat too. If you Google Christian West, you just get a bunch of information about, the Christian West, a lot of Christianity and religious things. So Christian Bradley West means you'll get me. So
There's as you hashtag Brad West, a lot of stuff comes up. There's a mayor of a city called, his name was Brad West.
see.
And it just goes on and on.
Yeah, so I decided to drop that
Yeah.
because I think there's one Christian Bradley West, and he messaged me on Twitter because I already had the handle, and he was really sad. That was a long time ago. And so and he was like, "Oh, you have my name," and I think that was the only Christian Bradley West that I've ever encountered in the world. So again. I'd like to say nobody's special, but everyone's unique. So if we capitalize on our uniqueness, so to speak, and maybe capitalize in the right word because that puts it in capitalistic terms, but if we use it, we use what we have, what's been handed to us, and in creative ways, then life is pretty interesting.
It is. I have one question for you before we sign off.
Please.
Who would you like to see on the Really Charlie podcast?
Oh, that I'll have to think about.
Yeah, and I figured that because of George. George said the same thing, and I know you guys have a huge amount of friends and people but
do you well, I have a question for you. Do you want a writer? Do you want someone who's more of a someone in the spiritual space, or you just don't care, you just want interesting humans?
Yep, it's interesting humans, and someone that you like, or someone that you think that would just I always say I want to give you your flowers while you're standing, so I want to highlight someone.
I like that,
and that's what I'm trying to do. And
yeah,
so George and Kim, you, if you have to think about it for a little while, go ahead and just send me an email or direct message, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I know a lot of interesting humans who would gladly come on and have a chat with you. So yeah, let me think about that.
All right, I appreciate it. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on this podcast. I will download this and put it on Spotify and Anchor within the next 20-30 minutes. And
good.
I'll put it
in my stories for you.
All right, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Christian,
so just send me the link. Make sure I get the link. Yeah,
I sure will. Christian Bradley West, you are a hell of a human. Or should I change that? A heaven of a human.
I'm okay. I'm okay with whatever. I get it. The sentiment's the same to me. I've been both in life.
All right.
I've been both. I continue to be both, probably, for some people, even myself some days. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's why I like you, brother.
So,
all right, you keep on inspiring people, keep on helping people. And everything that I see that has you in it, I'm going to put it on my podcast page and group and share it, just to put your name out there.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, it was a great evening, and thank you everyone who came along and for the ride, and yeah, we'll talk to you when we talk to you.
Okay, brother. You give your grandmother a hug for me, his electronic hub, and hopefully I see you soon face to face. That would be nice.
Absolutely. Well, you take care.
Take care, and God bless.
All right.
Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye. What a great guest. I am so happy to have. Everything that they told me about him, his personality, his conversation was definitely very exclusive, to the point, a normal guy doing normal things. He just happens to have quite a bit of followers on Instagram, and that's a good thing, because you go on his page, and I highly recommend everybody go on his page on Instagram and just review it, and I guarantee you on a daily basis you're going to click on something that he posts, because he's definitely a fascinating guy, and I really appreciate someone introducing me to him. So hey, you know me, I got a guest every Wednesday. Saturday I'm going to be on here talking about the justice that hasn't been served on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts. So we're going to definitely bring some issues up on Saturday morning, Saturday noontime. I'll be kind of giving my own intellect on that investigation, and I'll do that on Saturday. But all right, everyone, please subscribe and follow my YouTube channel, Really Charlie, and click and like, especially this podcast. Show the man that you love him. Show me that you appreciate this podcast like I appreciate you all every single week. So in closing, I'm going to end with my great intro song by Lionel Peter Walker. And I'll see you guys on Saturday at noontime. Take care.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.